Hello, welcome to Ask doTERRA. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Nicole Stevens, the managing scientist over essential oils here at doTERRA. Nicole, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
We have had an incredible response to hashtag Ask doTERRA with a lot of questions, and one common theme was get back to the basics. We need some essential oils for beginners. We have tens of thousands of people signing up every month, and they have some very simple questions, and I knew you'd be great to help us get down that path.
All right.
Just so you know, Nicole has prestigious degrees from a great university. She worked at Brigham Young University, she worked at the University of Utah, and she also worked at the UNLV Cancer Research Institute before we actually got to recruit her over to doTERRA. So we're thrilled to have you, mother of four, and so you've got both the practical as well as the clinical use of these oils.
Yes, we've been using doTERRA since the beginning. Absolutely love it. Use it every day in our house. So
that's fantastic. Well, the first question is the most basic, and that is, what is an essential oil?
So an essential oil is a very complex collection of different plant chemicals. It's distilled naturally from the plant and from different parts of the plant too. The oil will be stored in little glands that the plant has, and the oils are actually used for things like warding off insects and warding off pathogens for the plant. It's for the plant's protection. We've actually found that we can then take that oil, distill it, and use it for our benefit as well.
The question I get, obviously, right after the what is an essential oil is, how do we get the oils out of these plants? And for those who are slightly more advanced, they say, why does it take so much plant matter to make that? For example, I learned that it takes 100 bergamot oranges, it's one of my favorite essential oils, to get 3 little bottles. How is that possible, and how do we get them?
Oh, that's a great question. Bergamot, by the way, is one of my absolute favorites as well, so I'm glad you asked about that one. So we have to remember that the little glands where the plants store the essential oil are microscopic. So imagine, these are all over the surfaces of leaves or flowers or fruits, but they're so tiny. They only hold just a tiny, tiny bit. So we do have to take a lot of plant material to go ahead and either distill it down, or in the case of the bergamot, to press it out. So the citrus oils, we take the rind and we press and we squeeze those little glands until they release their oil. For the leaves, flowers, some barks, woods, things like that, we have to send steam through it. The steam will come through the plant material, and the steam will gently cause the sacs to rupture, and that will release all the wonderful oil. But because the sacs are so tiny, it takes a lot of plant material. And I don't know the exact number for the bergamot oranges, but I would say that that's probably in the neighborhood. And it depends a little bit too on when they're harvested and how long between the harvesting and the distillation. And there's lots of variables that go into it, but regardless, it takes a lot of plant material for all of our oils.
So that's fascinating. Are all essential oils created equally then? I mean, at some point you're using distillation or other means to get the oils out of these sacs, and they end up in a bottle, hopefully ours, but there are other bottles of essential oils. Are they all equal?
I would say emphatically no. It depends a lot on when you grow, how you grow, the soil you grow in, when you harvest, how you store, how you distill, how you bottle. You see, there's a lot of variables that go into it, and the sourcing team and the scientists at doTERRA work very closely with their growers to make sure that we have all of those variables covered. Because if any of those things goes awry, you're going to end up with an oil that's of a different chemistry and of a different quality than you'd like to end up with, basically. So we want to make sure that our oil is the very highest quality and that we have all of those variables at the place where they should be, that we're harvesting correctly at the time that we should be harvesting the correct plant parts, and that everything is the way that it should be to give us the highest quality oil.
So I just returned with my family from Bulgaria, where we have an amazing new distillery and are cooperating, our co-impact sourcing with these wonderful Bulgarian farmers. I was able to kind of go roll around in the lavender fields, and I kept talking to these different scientists, and they said Bulgaria and some parts of France really have the best lavender on earth. Can you tell me why that can be true?
So yeah, I think that that's true, because from what we can tell of lavender's history, that is where it has evolved over millennia, probably. That is where lavender is known to be native. And wherever possible, we like to source plants where they're native so that we can study their chemistry and see what that chemical profile is supposed to be like. And in the case of Bulgaria and France, where a lot of the lavender comes from, we know that it has evolved there, and the chemistry there is beautiful. It's at its peak of its evolutionary masterpiece, as it were. And so that's the kind of oil that we want to put into our bottles.
So that makes perfect sense. Obviously, natural products, plants are going to be impacted by their climate, by their soil, by pollutants. If you grow it next to a highway rather than up in a mountain, pristine place. Tell me, I know you've been doing some testing on lavender, both here in Utah and, of course, where we source it from France and Bulgaria. What are you finding?
So it's really interesting. I mean, you can do distillation on lavender from anywhere, all over the world. What we do find is it changes the chemical composition depending on where it's grown and how it's grown, and if it is exposed to pollutants. And again, we talked about all the variables that are involved here. So we're getting some good data to show that it's different depending on where it's grown. Now, that being said, we can still look for particular chemical profiles. So as we're sourcing our oils, we want to make sure that they fit that profile. And it's obviously best to have it be in this lovely, pristine environment. And if necessary, we can take a look at any types of plants grown anywhere. They have to be able to fit that profile. So we want to make sure that they have been grown with care and they have been harvested the way that they need to be and distilled the way they need to be. But in the case of lavender, it's been very interesting to see the differences of where it's grown and what the chemical profile ends up being.
One question that I get a lot and that we saw a lot on hashtag Ask doTERRA was about use of essential oils with children. You have 4 children, so you've seen it from the clinical side as well as your own personal experience. I have 5 kids, and they all use it in very different ways. What can you tell us about the safety, the best practices of using essential oils with your children?
So yeah, in using it with kids, I always just like to remember that these are little people. And even adults, you don't need very much essential oil to get huge benefits. They're very, very concentrated. And so in using them with my kids, and in general, when people ask me, how do you use it safely with kids? I tell them dosage is key. Just tiny, tiny amounts. And it's a really good idea to add the essential oil to a carrier oil. And what this does, it does a few things. Number one, it makes sure that they're getting the proper dose. It makes sure that they are having this lovely moisturizing barrier. It helps to minimize any skin sensitivity that they might have, because kids' skin in general tends to be more sensitive than adults. It's thinner, it's still developing. So we want to make sure that any possible sensitivities are minimized by using a carrier oil. So that's my favorite thing about the Touch line. That's probably the product we use the most in our house. My kids absolutely love the Touch oils. They're already in a base of coconut oil, so really convenient. I love carrying them around in my purse because I never know when a kid is going to say, "Oh, Mom, I want this," or "I need this." So I just pull those out, they're ready to go. And we love that we're able to use the oils for their benefit and yet be able to have them be as safe as possible for my kids. So just being sensitive to the children's needs, making sure that if you do have a question about the children's health and how an oil might benefit, it's a really good idea to have that conversation with the child's healthcare provider. That's something that we've always wanted to do as well, to work in conjunction with our healthcare providers so that they know what we want to try and they are aware of all the things that we're doing to support our health. So those are the 2 things I like people to remember, using carrier oils and making sure that the dose is consistent with a little person.
I found that out with peppermint. I love to put peppermint on my forehead or on the back of my neck, and I need a little more energy. And so when I first started here about a year ago, my daughter seemed a little sluggish, so I lathered it on. I always put on too much at that time, getting a little better on my dosage use. And it wasn't comfortable for her. But now that we've got the Touch line, it's much more comfortable and much easier for her to use it. And So there is a difference. I found out the hard way between how I would use an oil and perhaps how my 11-year-old daughter would use it.
Absolutely. And for us, it has been kind of a matter of trial and error. Certain kids like certain oils, and they like certain amounts of those oils, and so we play with it. We have fun with it, always keeping in mind that we're wanting to make sure that the safety is in place. And whenever we go and talk to our kids' pediatrician as well, I do let them know that we use and love essential oils, so the pediatrician is aware and can take that into account and can help us make our best decisions.
So you've talked about why it's so important to get these oils at the right place and the right time, and they are not created equal. Tell me about once it comes here, once it comes to the doTERRA headquarters. You're in the lab most of the time. It's fun to see you not in a white a white frock or whatever you call that. And what kind of testing do we do to ensure that we got it right?
That's a great question. So we do a lot of tests on the oil itself. We do test, how does it look? How does it feel? This is a kind of testing that's called organoleptic testing. We have some very highly trained scientists that know how it should look, how it should feel, how it should smell. That's kind of our first line of defense. If it doesn't look or smell right, none of the other tests really matter because it's not right. Our noses are very sensitive that way. So once we have passed that test, then we can move on to some of the chemical testing. So we do GCMS analysis, which stands for gas chromatography and mass spectrometry. And this is where we actually send it through a column that separates out all the constituents based on their size and tells us exactly what the oil is made up of. And we have a very strict standard for what we want that oil to be. And we compare that to past GCMS analyses to make sure that it's going to match up from batch to batch to batch. So we also do some other testing with an FTIR, which makes sure that there aren't any adulterants in there. We do testing for pesticides and heavy metals and all the things we want to make sure are not present in the oil to make sure that it's safe and clean. And we do continued testing even after the bottling. We want to make sure that it's stable, that the bottle and the cap and all the other pieces are going to keep their integrity over time, that the bottle and the oil will stay safe so that people can use them for years.
I have been amazed as I've been able to go walk around the research labs and watch all of the testing that goes on with each individual one. But I kind of am glad to hear too that the first test is just the one we can all do. I brought home an oil from another company that I received in some gift bag, and I did the test with my wife, and she immediately said, "Oh, that's terrible. It's like that's why I never buy a cheap perfume. You can just tell immediately." And she said, "Throw that away." And it was not doTERRA. It was the other one, and she got it right off the bat.
It really
with
can.
No training.
Yeah, it can be night and day difference. And I've read some papers actually that show as you train your nose to recognize certain constituents of oils and certain blends of constituents in oils, that your brain actually learns. It learns what's good and it learns what's right, and you can learn to recognize those things.
Sometime, not this show, I want to get all of the owners and other executives together, and we'll have some type of a game show where they have to sniff oils, and we'll get to a championship.
Oh,
Everyone
totally.
thinks it's going to be Emily versus Dr. Hill, but we might have some surprises. I don't know.
Can the scientists join?
Yes. Well, it depends. If you're going to win, probably not. But if
All right, I can moderate. How about that?
that's what we'll have you do, because you actually know what you're talking about. One thing that I evolved into, I've only been using essential oils for a little over a year, and my family and we love them. I use them from start to finish throughout the day. But it took me about 3 or 4 months before I started applying it to the bottom of my feet. It just didn't quite make sense to me until finally someone explained why that works. I mean, when I'd put it on my forehead, or I'd put the breathe right here. I mean, that kind of made sense to me on the area where I wanted to enjoy the oil. Can you explain for everyone why the bottom of the feet is a good place to use these oils?
Sure. I've heard a few different explanations. I think the one that makes the most sense to me is the bottom of your feet is where the skin tends to be the thickest. So there's that layer, the top layer of skin, your stratum corneum, that is kind of dry. And you can kind of see that sometimes on the bottom of feet, or really anywhere on your body when your skin gets dry. And the oil is able to absorb into that layer of skin, but because it's so thick, you're less likely to experience irritation that can sometimes occur in certain people with certain oils. So you can enjoy the oil on the bottom of your feet while limiting that kind of irritation that oils can bring. And the other reason that I've heard that I really like is that because your feet are far separated from your nose, you can use oils that you may not like the smell of, but you want the benefits of using. So that's the other reason.
Oregano, maybe.
Oregano, maybe.
We don't have enough time to get into this in any of the detail it deserves. We'll do an entire show on this at some point. But my favorite nephew's wife is pregnant for the first time. She is an avid doTERRA product user, and she asked, what should I change now that I'm pregnant? Can she just use the oils exactly as she used before, or are there best practices that she should think about?
That is a great question. And it's actually one that we get a lot in research and development. So I would say there definitely are some best practices for pregnant women to use the oils. And for me, the best practice was definitely to work with my healthcare provider. And it's something that we do recommend to pregnant women just because the healthcare provider knows the health history. They know what's going on. They're able to work with the mom and see what's going to work best in her situation. And for me, it didn't really change much my oil usage. I did use oils through all my pregnancies, absolutely loved it, had a wonderful experience, but I did work closely with my healthcare provider. And so that's something that I think would be the very best way to start for a pregnant mother who does want to use the oils, because they can be wonderfully supportive for a pregnancy.
Oh, perfect. Well, the final question I want to ask, because people always want to know, the scientist, the person who knows more about essential oils than almost anyone, who deals with them on every level. Do you have a favorite or two or three essential oils that you cannot do without?
I do.
Okay.
So bergamot, as we discussed, bergamot, however you say it, that is one of my all-time favorites. I love it because it is both kind of invigorating yet relaxing because of the chemical constituents that it has. It just smells wonderful. I diffuse that at my desk almost every day. I love spearmint. That has actually become one of my very favorite oils as well. So we like to diffuse that one at home. My kids love the smell of it. They say it smells like gum. Right. So we like how that one smells. And I really love frankincense. I put that one on with my moisturizer in the morning and at night. I feel like it just does wonderful things for my skin, and I'll come wake my kids up in the morning and they'll say, "Mom, you smell like wood." And they love it. They love the way it smells too. So those are probably three of my top ones, but it's so hard to choose because I love so many of them.
Thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to bringing you back many more times.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ask doTERRA. Please continue to submit your questions through #AskDoTERRA, and we'll get to it in upcoming shows.